although niche, this genre of of Hindu-based or Hindu-themed writing is kind of gaining popularity. And like you said, there is a market for it in India. I mean, Amish Tripathi is another leading author who's made a name for himself as far as the genre is concerned. I wanted to know specifically, what is your take on this genre of writing? I mean, there is so much of it out there. There are a lot of unknown writers too who are actually writing increasingly on the subject. So on the subject, and I mean choosing Hindu themes or Hindu characters or religious character, Hindu religious, for want of a better word, deities or so on and so forth, choosing them as their protagonists and then building their own half fictional, half based on what they know. What is your take on this entire exercise as a genre? Do you have? I mean, what are your comments?
I think it's a double-edged sword in the sense that it's neither good nor bad in and of itself, but it depends how it's done and in different contexts. So for example, in and of itself, taking let's say like a speculative take, right? So let's say that you have a character in the Mahabharata who has only 20 or 30 lines devoted to him or her in the epic. I think where a lot of this kind of literature comes from is this love or fascination for this character, and then because of the epic nature of the Mahabharata, actually it's interesting, in 20-30 lines, Vedavyasa is able to convey an entire personality and an entire character arc. Like you can just say any character's name and we immediately know what they are just based on what he has composed. But then we have, we live in a world where we read novels, where novels go through like the whole life story of a character and look at their psychology and things like that. So there is this natural impulse from there. And there's nothing inherently wrong with exploring that. I think within our tradition, the way that we have looked on these literary or artistic takes is that it should be in consonance with the ethos and the worldview and the vision of the original. And it should be something that either glorifies the divine. So there was actually something I learned from Professor Vishwa Adluri, which is when they were, the Mahabharata was being transmitted and he had these palm leaf manuscripts. And someone would have the duty of comparing manuscripts and then recording the version. So sometimes, let's say they would find a verse in one version that wasn't in another, and they would have to decide whether to include it or whether to exclude it. Now, they didn't do an analysis of historically, was this an interpolation or something like that. They would look at it and say, does this particular verse glorify Narayana? And if so, then it shouldn't be forgotten, it shouldn't be lost, and let's preserve that. So this is kind of this very expansive, holistic vision that we have. That works very well, I think, when you have people who are grounded in and familiar with the original text. So they can understand, oh, here is where some liberties were taken and here is where it's not. What you're finding nowadays is, you see this on like Quora and Reddit and Google all the time, that something showed up in the Star TV serial on the Mahabharata. And so now that must be true. Whether it's depictions of Karna or other things. That's where it becomes dangerous, because we've become so alienated from our own textual heritage that these kinds of takes can end up being a substitution for the original. That's not a good thing. However, if it can be a gateway to the original, so for example, last year I read a book on Circe by Madeline Miller. So it's a novel, it's a take on the character of Circe from Greek mythology. And she wrote it so well that after reading that, like, I wanted to read a lot more about Greek mythology. So I knew it's a novel. I knew it's based on her, kind of feminist take. I appreciated that, but then I wanted to go back into the original. So if you have literature that does that, then that can be a very good thing, or if it's just making it available to a wider audience. But that's where I think it's kind of this double-edged sword. And so as authors in that genre, I think we have to be very careful to be responsible, and always be cognizant of that. So even if we're going beyond what's there in the lines of the text, to not deviate from the underlying spirit or ethos.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.